Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm just going to talk about some books I read recently over the last couple of weeks, and I'm going to go over them in the order I've read them. So the first book I wanted to talk about is The Break by Katherena Vermette. This was a buddy read with Margaret Pinard. It was a book that was on my 40 before 40 list. And just a very highly anticipated read for me. So did it live up to my expectations? I didn't end up giving this book 5 stars, but I still thought it was really good. So the book starts when a young mother is looking out of her window. She lives next to this kind of isolated barren strip of land called The Break. So one evening she looks out the window and she witnesses a horrible crime. And as a side note, I would definitely check out the trigger warnings for this book because it is definitely difficult. But the woman witnesses this crime, but it's also snowy and dark outside, so she can't quite see what's happened. And her children are both crying, so she doesn't go outside to see what is going on. But she does have this feeling that something very wrong happened, and she contacts the police. So that is kind of the setup of this book, and the rest of the story is the lead up to this crime, the aftermath, and how it shakes up this entire family and community. The book is set up in 4 parts, and in every part we meet the same group of people who are all connected in a way, both to each other and to this violent attack. So obviously the witness, the woman that we talked about, but also the victim, a friend of the victim, different family members, the police officer who is researching this crime, and we shift narratives between them, but in every chapter they are all in the same order. So we never really get a full picture of what happened in a straightforward manner, but from these different narratives we can kind of piece it together. And I think that immediately brings me to why I didn't love this book. I felt it centered too much around the crime. It makes sense because it was a horrible thing that happened, and of course that's going to be the main event in the lives of the people that are involved at that time. But I felt when reading this, I spent a lot of time speculating about what happened and who was involved and what was the chain of events. And I'm not really a crime or mystery book kind of reader, so that part wasn't really my thing. I just don't really care about the crime. I want to read about the people. If you are a regular crime book reader, then you probably won't think of this as a crime novel at all, because it's still very character based. But for me it was just a little bit too much about piecing the puzzle together and trying to figure things out, which just wasn't what I was expecting, I guess. Other than that, I thought that this was a really well executed book. I think the writing is beautiful. It's lyrical but not very overly flowery. I felt like it fitted the story really well. I felt the characters were very well developed and very distinct. Because of the way the book is structured, you only get a little time with each character, but I didn't have any problem distinguishing between them. I turned on the light because it was getting a little bit dark. I think the absolute strength of this book is the way it shows familiar bonds and the dynamics between the characters. Did I mention that this author is indigenous and all the POV characters are all Métis? I can't remember if I said that, but in any case that plays a big role in the story as well. It shows the intergenerational trauma and the cyclical nature of that. but also the closeness of this family and this inherent knowledge of knowing what to do when tragedy strikes, and how it brings everyone together. It is about the strength of women. The men in this book are almost like an afterthought. It is all about sisters and mothers and daughters and aunts and grandmothers, and the power of solidarity between them, which I loved, because the story in itself was rather bleak and desperate, but the female empowerment, the sense of female empowerment in this really gave it a glimmer of hope. So yeah, this was a very well crafted, very layered novel, and I would recommend it, but like I said, check out the trigger warnings for this book. And then I read Visibility, edited by Wong, which was a tiny bit of a disappointment, maybe. Or maybe it was just different from what I expected. I still gave it 4 stars on the Storygraph, so it's still a book I really liked. But okay, so this is a collection of essays, or stories rather, from a whole bunch of people, all with different disabilities, ranging from neurological disorders, visual and hearing impairments, disfigurements, chronic illnesses, mental illnesses, learning disabilities. It's very wide-ranging, and the aim of the book, I believe, was to amplify these voices, to put a visibility on disability, like the title might suggest. I think this collection absolutely succeeds in that. It really opened my eyes to how diverse the disability community is. Obviously, in any sort of anthology of essays or stories, there's going to be ones you like and ones you don't. And I think, unfortunately for me, in this there was only a few I thought they were really well done. I appreciated a lot that it introduced me to a lot of topics that I was either not aware of or only vaguely, and it gave me a lot of food for thought. I just thought the majority of the essays in itself just weren't very remarkable. I like it when essays have a clear point to make. I like it when they have a beginning, a middle and an end, even if the whole thing is just a few pages. And a lot of the writing in this was just beginnings or introductions, and I miss kind of the core of the stories. I still think as a collection it really works. The collective impact of the sheer volume of stories really works. I just wanted them to work on their own as well. So that was Disability Visibility by Wong. The next book I read was A Line in the World, A Year on the North Sea Coast by Dorthe Nors, and this is translated from the Danish by Caroline Waite. If you watched my last video, you will have seen that this ended up on my favorite non-fiction of the year list. Yeah, I just had a really lovely time reading this. So to write this book, this author has spent a year traveling up and down the North Sea coast, specifically the Danish coast, but also down to Germany a little bit and the northern parts of the Netherlands. And the results are these beautifully written essays or chronicles, where she explores the connection between the nature and the landscape and the weather, history, people, language. It was just so wide in scope and rich in storytelling, very reflective, full of wanderlust. Yeah, absolutely one of the biggest surprises for me this year. Then I read one of the biggest celebrity memoir releases this year, The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. I listened to the audiobook of this. Britney herself reads the foreword, but the rest of it is done by Michelle Williams. which I think was absolutely the best choice, because she does a phenomenal job in narrating this memoir. I think this was a book that lots of people were looking out for, because she was under this conservatorship for 13 years. And after that, I think a lot of people, and me included, were hoping we would get to hear her side of the story. And boy, do we get a story. It was even more astounding and heartbreaking than I thought it would be. She tells her story in a chronological way. So she starts with her childhood, her relationship with her parents, what the family situation was like growing up, her getting into the entertainment industry, her rise to fame. And already in that first part you can see the cracks in the foundation. You can see it's not a particularly healthy and stable way for a child to grow up. And then we continue hearing her story, you know, when she was at the height of her fame, but also at the same time struggling with burnout, with depression, with going through difficult breakups, becoming a mother, and all that under this very intense media scrutiny. I think everyone will probably remember that Leave Britney Alone meme video. And we were all mocking him, and we all thought it was funny. But now, in retrospect, we know that he was right. You know, he could see that she needed a break. If only we all listened. And I think in particular, that whole period from like her early 20s to basically when the conservatorship started, it's just very hard to read about, because there were just so many signs that she wasn't doing well, and if only she was able to take a break, to step away from the public eye, and get help for her mental health, you know, get the help she needed, things would have been very different. And the overwhelming feeling I had when reading this book was how the hell this was allowed to happen. How do we let media and society treat people this way? It obviously reminds me a lot of Princess Diana's story. But even like, I'm reading this book at the moment called The Vanishing Act of Esme Lennox, which was about a woman who was put in an asylum at a very young age. And I've only just started this, so I don't know exactly what the plot of the book is. But it's a story about a woman or a girl who didn't act the way a proper lady was supposed to act. And her family didn't know what to do with her. So the solution of the family was to put her away. So I'm kind of seeing parallels between that story and Britney's stories. And, you know, it reminds me of those 19th century women's hysteria stories. Sean of Storytime in her review said that it almost had this Southern Gothic feel to it, which I totally agree with as well. So yeah, it's just to say that it is very difficult to rhyme the current world we are living in and what we know now to what happened to Britney Spears, because it feels so old-fashioned and it just feels so backwards. And just remembering how the media climate was like back in the early 2000s, you know, even though that just doesn't seem that long ago. So yeah, a very intense, difficult and eye-opening book to read. Was it the best writing? No, but I didn't expect that either. And I thought it was very fitting and it felt very authentic. Yeah, I think you should definitely check this book out. One of the best celebrity memoirs I've read in a very long time. Okay, then I also read Diepdiepblauw by Nikki Dekker. The title translates as Deep Deep Blue. This is a Dutch book. It's not translated yet, but I really hope it will be at some point in the future, because I thought this was really excellent, and I think it would work really well for an international audience. It is a debut novel, and on the blurb it is described as an essayist novel. It's written in a very non-linear, non-straightforward manner. The title of every chapter, or every essay if you will, is the name of a creature or something to do with the ocean or water. So like shark, octopus, jellyfish, seahorse, but also words like swimming lesson and shipwreck. And all the chapters are a combination of nature writing and like actual animal facts connecting to the main character and the events of her life, sometimes from her childhood, sometimes her adult life or her student life, sometimes all of them. It's all kind of mixed up. You know, like I said, it is very non-linear, but the chapters are all thematically connected, even if there is no chronological order to this at all. Yeah, I thought it was really cleverly done, but not in an overly complicated way. It is a coming-of-age story, especially around being bisexual, and it's this exploration of queerness in both the life of the main character and in the natural world, and how these two elements speak to each other. I will say that one thing that really worked for me, but maybe not for others, was that to me it was incredibly nostalgic. The author is very close in age to me, and she brings in a lot of elements to this book that were just very familiar to me. You know, things like movies, music, but also toys and just things I used to do and things I used to have. So yeah, I don't know what it is like to read this book when you don't have that element of nostalgia to it. You know, I don't know how well it translates to different generations, but to me that really added something extra. You know, just the way she describes being a child or being a teenager in high school was just so on point. You know, I felt like, yeah, it was exactly like that. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a really excellent and exciting debut. So I'm looking forward to reading more of her work as it comes out. Also, there's like a 2-page list of books at the end of the book where she got all her nature facts from. So those are all gonna go on my TBR as well. And the last book I want to talk about today is actually a book I did not finish in the end, but I still read about 80% of it, so I think that gives me enough credit to still talk about it. And that is the short story collection Hungry Hearts and Other Stories by Anzia Yezierska. These are all stories about Jewish immigrant women from Russia who are now living in tenements and sweatshops in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And what I think the author did really well was capture that desperate poverty, the cyclical nature of it, the unfairness of not being able to get out of this poverty. It really paints a very vivid picture of a time and place. You know, it's dirty and gritty and hopeless, but at the same time it also transcends time and place, and it has this very universal quality to it. I just don't think the stories in themselves were very well done. The characters felt more like caricatures than actual people. The dialogue felt very forced. I mean, this book has an insane amount of exclamation marks, and the actual phrase "woe is me" is used way too many times. So I didn't like the writing. A lot of the stories just didn't make any sense. like I said when I was talking about disability visibility as well, I like essays to have a clear beginning, middle and end, and I feel the same way about short stories. For me, like the main part of a short story can be like the tiniest event, but it has to have a start and a finish. And I felt like in a lot of these stories we were just dropped into it and taken out at a random point, and it just, yeah, it didn't make sense. And that made me feel very unsettled when reading this book. I still finished most of these stories, you know, because when you're reading a collection of short stories, there's always a chance that the next one is going to be brilliant, and you keep looking for that one gem. But yeah, I had like 3 stories left, and already I noticed I was kind of skimming through the previous story, so yeah, I just put it down. So yeah, that was that. Here is another stack of books I read in the last couple of weeks. So 1 DNF, but the other ones I all gave between 4 and 4.5 stars, so not bad at all, not bad at all. Have you read any of these books? Do you want to read any of these books after I talked about them? I'd love to have a chat in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully I will see you in my next video, where I think I will talk about a fun reading project I have planned for January. Yeah, that is it for today. I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.